2, 1.
Good morning, hello, and welcome. We are off and running. We appreciate tuning in.
Is that the cold open?
To the H3O podcast. I am Joel Rather here with my masked and super conservative co-host Jason Hirsch.
This is getting ridiculous right now.
So I forced him to do it.
I can't breathe.
He has the
I've
first
got
light.
asthma.
What's that called?
Huh?
The first light.
This is the Arrow Wool Buff.
Arrow Wool Buff.
I like
buff.
this thing.
Yeah. So
except I can't breathe, so I'm going to take it off.
I've
got asthma.
We'll see his face. But we are fortunate today. We have two very special guests, and super cool that we could kind of wrangle both of them in at the same time. Jason Phelps and Dirk Durham with Phelps Game Call and the Bugler, as he's so aptly known. So thanks for joining us today, guys. How are you?
Oh, hey there.
Good.
Doing
Thanks
great.
for having us.
We're
going to have to direct questions here so we don't get them talking over
yeah.
each other.
So sometimes we would make this a social event, but I didn't figure you guys would want to pour a drink at 9:30 in the morning or whatever it is. So
I got nothing else to do. Don't tempt me.
Well, you can't drink all day if you don't start early.
Right.
I've always said that. I've always felt that was the only way to go.
This may or may not be coffee in this mug.
So. Right. So
we'll just use your imagination.
But a lot of things that obviously we'd love to cover, kind of pitch to you guys in different directions. I know Jason and I have talked about a whole bunch of things. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun with it as well. Do have a few questions that we got from folks online that we'll fire at you guys, and we'll just kind of navigate through this. And we appreciate your time and know that it's definitely been interesting for everybody, and maybe we'll get into that as well. And hopefully we'll talk a little hunting. I don't know. Do you guys, does that sound like a plan?
What's hunting?
You bet.
I'm just a hiker.
So, yeah, but we're professional bow hikers.
Yes. I'm gonna advertise my services. I'll take your rifle or your bow for a walk in the woods for a week at a time.
So
I'll forget dog walking.
That's right. I'll report progress and take pictures.
Yeah. So kind of getting into things a little bit here. Maybe we'll start. I know Jason had a couple questions that he was going to ask. We'll go Jason to Jason right out of the gate, and we'll move our way through this. So.
Well, first off, I want to just say to both you guys, we've met Dirk in person at the Rocky Mountain Outdoorsman Show. And then obviously we've communicated, with Jason through, emails and now obviously on a podcast, but you guys, for being as big in this industry as you are, you're both very humble human beings and very gracious with your time. And I think that's something that we don't see in a whole lot of industries is, guys who are willing to just reach out to, random folks and spend some time with them talking about their passions. And that's kind of where, my leadoff question here is going to start is, why game calls? Like, why get into that market? This is obviously directed more towards Jason because I know, Dirk, you've got a background with other companies. But, Jace, there's all these other people that make game calls, whether it's, a Primos or Rocky Mountain or something like that. Why did you decide that you want to get into this game that, effectively looked like it was a pretty crowded field?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of two parts to it. I've always joked that no matter what, until the time I die, I'm going to have some sort of business. Whether it's, it started off on tinkering on, four-wheeler motors, dirt motocross motors, old nose, and just the engineer in me just is always tinkering, trying to improve on stuff. When I got tired of working for 24 packs of beers from all my buddies, I'm like, this working on four-wheelers isn't a very profitable gig. And then, always tinkering, with elk calling being my passion, thinking I was pretty good at it back in the day when I first picked it up. I went to a very, very small sporting, kind of an outdoor show, a local one, real small. And there was a guy there, a local guy, turning some calls, and, me just being me, he said, "Hey, what do you got for elk calls?" And he blew on it, and it sounded like what I thought a duck call should sound like. I was like, well, this guy is able to sell calls, and I should be able to do this. And so, I probably spent a year researching, like, well, how do you even get started? Because to be honest, I had no no manufacturing background, no, I had design background from my normal work as an engineer, so I could sit down and design anything. Um, still being fairly young, I knew of 3D printing becoming a more popular option. So I knew I had some ability to combine all of this, and it just kind of, and to be honest, when we started, it was truly just a hobby. I had no idea it was going to get to where it was. I never set out with a goal for it to get to where it was. And so it was really just kind of my OCD combined with one of my passions, and it just kind of grew into what it was.
Yeah.
And there was a little frustration with what was on the market. I'm not going to lie. That's just, it's like, well, why can one of these be good, but the other 9 of them aren't good? Like, there's got to be a recipe to make them all 10 sound this good.
Right.
And, a lot of what I do when I go to set out on a design, like, I'm actually thinking of my builder as much as I am the end user. Like, all right, we can build this call for the end user, but can my builder consistently build that over and over? If he's 10% out on this side of the call, or if he's 10% out on that side of the call, him or her, is that call still going to function and function very well? And so it was just kind of that passion to make these things better. And I hopefully, we've been able to accomplish some of that.
Yeah, I think the consistency thing is probably something that's really huge with that. And I know, Dirk, when we talked to you here in Denver, we kind of talked briefly about that, where I was like, how do you determine, obviously there's, different types of latex and things. And I know there's some funny stories. We can talk about that, even just the exploration of some of those materials. But Dirk you were telling us about, specific tensions and stuff like that. Like, how did you come to, figure out what was right for you, Dirk, in terms of, I'm sure you've blown hundreds of calls over the years, and like, what was your tinkering process, and then how did that tie in with Jason as far as coming up with what's now, your Maverick call?
Well, I've always thought that the more authentic your elk calls can sound, the more likely the elk are going to come to you, right?
Sure.
And out of frustrations of not finding, quality, consistent sounds from diaphragm to diaphragm to diaphragm, kind of led me to Jason, because, I tried his stuff, and just, the very first handful of calls he ever sent me, they were all a little bit different. But one thing they all had in common was, you threw every single one of them, you threw them in, you could make quality sounds with. I may not be able to blow as hard on this one. I could blow harder on this other one, but they were all like really super good quality. So then that led us towards, working on building a relationship of working on this signature call, the Maverick. And the kind of the process that we went through is, Jason kind of had an idea of what I liked as far as like latex tension. So we kind of went on the lighter side and then the heavier side of that spectrum, and then used several different tensions of tightness of the stretch of the latex. And I don't know, he sent me 20 to 50 calls, something like that. And I just, every single one of them, I'd take out, blow it, put it back, and I had a yes pile and a no pile. And then in my yes pile, I go back through them and go back and make a smaller yes pile and a bigger no pile, until I kind of had it narrowed down to where I really liked these core. There'd be a handful of them that I liked. So then over the years, there's been a few different calls that I like to make, that a call that's not built just right won't make the call. It will not consistently hold up. It'll kind of maybe cut out or flatten out. It won't make that crisp, clean cut. So I found that this certain thickness of latex range would make that sound, but some different colors would make the sound a little more articulate, a little more, on point. It was a little easier to move, and the notes would move a little quicker. So I just kind of narrowed it down by that. And then that's kind of how I came to that green latex and that stretch on the Maverick. And so then as far as the stretch, we kind of tinkered with that a bit afterwards, because I know what works good for me, but let's face it, Joe Public may or may not like it, that stretch that tight right off the bat. So we kind of backed it off a little bit to kind of make that little bit of a compromise to where, you know, it'd be a little bit more user friendly for you know, for the customers versus just me. So, and I still like the call in that regard. It still works really great for me. So I don't use anything special. I just grab some that are just production models, you know, the ones we would sell to the public, and I take them hunting. So anyway, that's kind of the what we kind of did to narrow it down to what I liked.
Yeah, I think it's really cool or interesting, I guess, to think that, I mean, you look at an elk call, you know, like you look at your amp and you know, all the different colors, and you just think, well, that's just different colored tapes, and it looks like it's the same, you know, kind of basic frame and latex, but there's so much more that goes into it that makes it either easier to blow or more difficult to blow. I know I've got a buddy who's just getting into learning how to, you know, use a mouth reed, and he sucks at it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. He's freaking terrible. Yeah, he's sitting there like trying to make the sounds, and I'm like, dude, I think you got the wrong one. Like, I've told him, I'm like, go get, you know, some Phelps ones and order a bunch of them and see which one you can blow, because that's ultimately the one that's going to lead you down the path to finding the right fit for you. And he just went out and bought some generic stuff from, you know, one of the outdoor outfitters or outdoor stores out here in Denver. But yeah, I just think it fascinates me. I know, you know, Jason, you're an engineer by trade, and I think I've just got a curious mind. And I just think that stuff baffles me when I think about how much science goes into such a simple product.
Yeah, and it's, you know, when we started working with Dirk, you know, we, and not that everybody couldn't make the same conclusion, but, you know, he had some of the same conclusions that I had, like, well, the black latex is just a little bit slower than the green, you know, and just stuff like that we were picking up. And it's crazy, you know, you bump up the latex by 25 10,000ths, and now you have to redo your stretches. I mean, so we're dealing with, you know, minute thickness changes that we can feel and, you know, have to make accommodations to as we build the call. And that's one thing that's led to some of our consistency is, like, you know, Dirk's call requires a very, very specific thickness of latex. And if it gets too thin, I can't even do anything within the stretches that the end consumer thinks it's going to be the same call. And if it gets too thick, I can stretch it a little bit more, but as soon as it gets, you know, too thick, I can't even make it sound like the same call. And that's some of our commitment is I'm not afraid to throw, you know, a $20,000, you know, dollar latex order back at the manufacturer and say, try again. This isn't what we agreed on. This isn't the specs that we said that you could meet.
Yeah. I think, you know, as I'm thinking through this, it's like there's so many things that you can maybe make parallels with in terms of, like, think of other things that you buy and how much process goes through finding the right type, style, fit, and whatever else. And I think a lot of the maybe the average hunter or the person who goes into a Cabela's or a Bass Pro Shops and walks through, you know, the aisles and stuff like that, and they see this, you know, there's always this wall of recalls, and it's really hard for them to understand, you know, what is the difference between a lot of these, and at the same time understand the nuances with that and realize, like, for me, I can tell you in my early years, like, this is a huge, I mean, I'm guilty of it as well, where it's like, I'll just try that one. And, you know, for me, probably over the last 10 plus years, until I really came upon, you know, you guys, and I've tried all, you know, everything under the sun, like, found something where, you know, last year when I, you know, kind of put together a call series and really just showed a host of whole different things, including obviously, you know, what you guys, sent out, you know, I think you have to have a critical ear to be able to actually tell the difference, right? And I think that's one thing that the average person maybe can't tell, like Dirk's talking about, you know, those small nuances and, you know, sharp tones and how, you know, the call itself, if you're bugling, the kind of crescendo of it as it goes up, and how quickly can you change between those things, and are they smooth, are they raspy, are they, you know, whatever. And once you try a bunch of them and you get to where you can actually make some consistent calls, and I think a lot of times you start, you know, maybe it's a question for both of you guys, like, how does someone start rather than, you know, just wailing away on, on a tube or using a diaphragm and learning how to cow call, what are some strategies that you tell people like, hey, this is a good way to start this process so you can identify what's going to work for you?
I like to tell people, it's kind of like crawling before you walk. If you're a new caller, you don't just grab a diaphragm and throw it in your mouth and start ripping big bugles. It doesn't work that way. I mean, you can try, but most people are just 99% of the people just aren't a natural, and they don't just throw it in the mouth and their mouth and know exactly what to do. So the best thing for me, and my advice is maybe to just start learning to make some noises on it. Like, let's make some fundamental sounds, fundamental noises, consistently start making those noises. I always preach this noise, this mosquito noise. Try to make that this really high pitched mosquito noise with your diaphragm, and learn to control it. When you first try, it might be kind of wavy and you can't really find the right pitch, but as you practice finding that mosquito noise and then holding it throughout, you take a deep breath and then you exhale your whole breath across the diaphragm. And as air pressures change and you have to change your tongue pressure to maintain that same pitch, then now you're learning control, you're learning muscle memory for your tongue. And then that's a fundamental sound of making elk calls. So then you can take that noise and turn it into cow calls, into bugles, into barks, into chuckles, so on and so forth on down the road. But it's just learning to make some noise right off the bat before you try to start making fancy bugles.
Yeah. Jason, what do you think?
I'm going to piggyback on that and go a little bit different direction. So don't go right to trying to, sound like the biggest, baddest elk in the wood. There are those fundamentals. But one thing I'm going to say more from the call selection side, and maybe, Dirk and me and Charlie and some of the guys that have signature calls do a disservice to our customers, is everybody thinks they should buy our calls if they want to sound like me and Dirk. And really, it's probably not the best diaphragm to start with. You should really start at the lower end of the spectrum, the blacks, greens, and grays, until you get the hang of it, and then slowly progress into our calls. So, like I say, we may do a little disservice thinking that, you should buy our calls to sound like us.
Shoot for the moon.
Really take
Do
those
it.
baby steps.
You want to be the best, you buy the best.
Right.
That way you can sound like the best.
That's brought to you by.
No,
That's right.
I'd have to agree with that too. Like trade shows, you get a lot of folks coming up. They're like, I want that Maverick. Well, have you ever used a call before? Nope, never have. So I try to steer them into okay, I'll sell you one if you really want it, but I kind of explain the differences between some of the others. And there's some others that are a lot more user friendly for newer callers.
Yeah.
So I try to, I kind of give them choices and try to steer them into maybe another direction, because I want them to have a good experience. This is their first experience with our calls. I don't want them to pick up that Maverick and say, yep, it's all hype. This thing's a piece of crap. No, I want to make sure I want to get them to the right call, and maybe someday that Maverick will be good for them. Maybe not. There's
Right.
guys that have been calling for years, and they use the pitch black, or they use the black amp or whatever. I mean, everybody's so different. So you never can call it really.
Yeah. I think that, last year for me, I really kind of went through the spectrum of most everything that you guys have in terms of the different types and styles, whether it's the pitch black series and Jason, your call, and the Maverick. And, I kind of landed on the amp white because I kind of identified that I'm about as, I've got about as much finesse as a sledgehammer. And so for me, I felt like I could be a lot more distinct in just like how I personally, apply pressure and just the way that I can kind of be maybe a little bit more in terms of the amount that I blow through that. And I found that from a sound perspective, I can use a bunch of them, but I feel most comfortable in that because I think what it boils down to a lot of times is once you get to where you can make sounds that, maybe you feel relatively confident with is just being comfortable and confident enough to blow that thing. And more importantly, like, we carry our tubes and stuff and diaphragms in our trucks and, blow them all the time so our wives don't yell at us and whatever. But for me, it's like, what happens once you step into the woods, right? Like, can you do that? And are you confident when that happens?
Yeah, I'm fairly new to the hunting calling game, and he's exactly right. It's just figuring out that progression. I know I bought the Cat Road Shuffle Kit from the BRO website, and I know those are your guys' calls in there, and I progressed through every one of those colors. And some weeks it was one color that I thought was really good, and then the next week it was another color that was really good. But yeah, that was it was good for me to have kind of that learning curve there. So, yeah. I don't know. Do you guys?
Uncomfortable silence.
Uncomfortable silence there. I know. I love driving around with the windows down and blowing the mouth calls without moving my lips at all, and I get some incredible looks from people, especially dogs. People walking their dogs. That might be my favorite thing to do outside of actually trying to call an elk, is to call a dog, or to really fool somebody in their car and they start looking around going, like, what the hell? Where's that sound coming from?
Yeah.
Now, it's
go ahead.
Yeah, that progression. I was going to speak on that. That progression. Like I tell a lot of folks, they'll probably, when they first start calling, they'll find, I really like this, whatever diaphragm it is. But as they get better, they'll be like, well, that was pretty good, but this other one really works good. It's just like you kind of find your way. And that may lead you into a complete different diaphragm than you started with. So,
I may have blown.
Don't be afraid to experiment.
I may have blown a few of those reeds out too, using them day in, day out. And the ones that I wasn't using were the ones that had the tighter latex, so they got better sound or better sounding as the hunting season got closer.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of that, like, what's when does someone know? I mean, I think like. When you go through and you start using them, and you do it relatively frequently, a lot of people like to stay pretty fresh in their calling. When does someone know, like, that call maybe has lost its stretch, or like, what do you guys recommend? Is there a time frame, like even care, right? Like, I think about leaving mine in my truck and like in the middle of the summer, like, does that start to affect it and those types of things? Like, what's your recommendation on that, Jason?
Yeah, so on the first phase of that question is, I think most people, even if they're good or not, they'll physically or they'll audibly be able to hear a difference. Like, that call will lose its high note. It might lose its top two high notes. You can just kind of feel that call starting to loosen up, become a better cow call, and sort of lose its top end on the bugle. And, sometimes that could just be as much as you've been using it for 2 hours straight and the call's starting to get heavy or waterlogged. You let it dry back out, it could, come back to life. So I think most people can tell, all right, that call's on its last leg. It's not holding up to high notes. It's not getting as much volume. And then as far as proper storage, we're pretty, let it dry on a counter, especially on single reeded elk calls. Turkey calls and stuff like that, where we have multiple reeds of latex, there's a different strategy. But on single reeded elk calls, you can literally just let them dry on the counter. Keep them out of the sunlight, keep them out of the 130-degree dash of your car, and you should get your maximum life out of them.
Yeah.
So that's it's real simple storage. If people are really trying to get additional years out of them, which I recommend on turkey calls, we can get 3, 4, 5 years out of a turkey call. On an elk call, the ultimate storage is refrigerator or freezer. Dry them off after you clean them off with water. Let them dry, and then throw them in the fridge or freezer. A cool, dark place is the best storage for those.
Yeah.
So your dashboard's not a good place to keep them, Joel?
No, that's good news.
It's a great spot if you're a call manufacturer.
Right.
I was just going to say, no,
keeps you in business.
That's really good news for you guys, because it looks like I'm in the call buying.
Yeah, you might
business.
be in the market for some new calls.
which is probably okay. So. looking at it kind of you touched on it just a little bit there. Let's talk, turkey calls, and I know even your duck call lines. Like Dirk, I have yet to see you blow a duck call. What's your ability to blow duck and turkey calls? Let's go.
Turkey calls. I think turkey calls pretty solid. I'm not going to win any championships. I'm a pretty solid turkey caller. Now for ducks, the only noise I know a duck makes is what maybe Daffy Duck might say. I've never duck hunted a day in my life.
Really?
I don't even know. They say quack. Ducks say quack.
I always joke with my kids. I take the estrus call and I'll just move a little higher up on the reed and I'll start quacking it. And I'm like, hey, look, I can duck call, but clearly it's not a very good duck call.
No, it's not. It's terrible.
Sounds more like a frog.
Yeah. Jason,
That's probably like what I'd sound like.
same question for you, Jason. Like I've never seen you blow your duck calls either, as far as I can tell. But
not on video, at least.
No, I'm full transparency. Every time I go to a trade show, I still get taught how to blow our duck calls. And that's the thing. Like, it was never my design. So we just teamed up with Eric Strand out of Oregon. A championship style caller, and just asked him like, hey, he wanted to do something with us. We want to do something with him strategically. And so, why take a guy that can't blow a duck call versus a guy that can blow it in the top 99.9% and say, hey, let's work on something together? And that's really how our waterfowl line, started out, with him making and designing those duck calls, and then him. He's currently working on some goose calls.
Nice.
On the turkey call side, I would say I'm a very good turkey caller, but duck call not so good.
Well,
Leave it to the experts. Make sure you just take them out with you.
Yeah, I'm an equal opportunity caller. Like I grew up in Nebraska and grew up on like waterfowl ground, North Platte, South Platte rivers and stuff like that. So for me, like any calling that I did at an early age was all waterfowl. And so I was telling Jason the other day, I'm like, I'm planning to get my hands on, one of your duck calls, because I've gone through a gamut of them, and I usually carry 3 of them. And so I want to get my opportunity to vet those as well, and get my hands on them, because for me, that's like, it's funny because I kind of liken it probably to what you guys consider, your comfort level as far as like, blowing bugle tubes and stuff like that. Like I can pick up a duck call and I'm like, all right, let's rock, and the progression on learning how to turkey call, which came like maybe in my high school to college years and stuff like that. Kind of similar processes of, learning how to use them. And now like the last 10 to 15 years has been trying to learn how to elk call. So I don't know. I'd say I'm a master of none, is what I'm getting at, basically.
I mean, ducks do come in when you quack. So
he's seen it.
I'm not going to put you down there.
But what's the difference in the make as far as the turkey call comparatively to a diaphragm for an elk call?
So for us, and what I found in my own calling style, and then getting a lot of feedback from good elk callers and good turkey callers, is we've mentioned that we have the amp frame on the elk call side. So it's got a radiused aluminum plate over top of the latex that provides us with some very good characteristics and a good all-around call. On the turkey call side, I believe you sound a lot more like a turkey if we use the old traditional flat frame. No plate, no aluminum above it, just flat. And what that does is it allows us to use, most turkey calls are triple reeds. You have 2 playing reeds, gives us some of that pitch break, and then your top reeds typically cut to give us that rasp of some sort. The smaller amount of overhanging material gives you less rasp. The more cuts, the more material overhanging that second reed, the more rasps you're going to have. Those turkey calls, not only do they have 3 times as much latex, are typically stretched 3 times ish, plus or minus, than an elk call. So that's why we get that crazy durability out of a turkey call, is because we've got 3 times as much latex and we're stretching it 3 times as much. So I mean, those calls are just built to last a long time. And as we mentioned earlier, there's a little bit of storage technique that changes. We recommend using like dull toothpicks to keep those layers of latex separated when they dry, so that we don't get any kind of latex rot,
Nice.
or we don't want those latex reeds to stick together for the during storage.
Yep. Yeah.
You don't want to get the Rona in your reeds.
No.
For real.
That's good.
So, what do you maybe you can't talk about it, but are there any Black Ops projects for Phelps that are something new that's coming to market, or some kind of innovation that you guys are going to be starting to push?
Can we
I
talk
would
about
love
any
to
of that
be able
stuff,
to tell
Dave?
you- Well,
Can we do
definitely
world
be talking
exclusives
about
here?
We could tell you,
I
but we'd have to
wish- I
kill
wish-
you.
Oh, well, in that moment.
We were on a roll until this mess of a virus hit and slowed and halted everything. So I don't know. We were set for a June 1st release on a lot of new stuff, and that's completely been blown out of the water, even if we can prototype test some of this stuff this year. So normally I would say we could probably start to let the cat out of the bag because we were close enough, but we're kind of in a holding pattern.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I wasn't expecting anything out of that. I was just figured I'd poke and pry and see if there was a foot in the door that I could sneak in.
The timing would have been perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's
All right. Well, there goes that whole page of questions. Next
Yeah.
one.
Dang it. Dang it.
All right. Come. Switching back. Let's talk about elk hunting. That's fun. We had a conversation last week. Talked with Steve Chappell. Steve is long known in the industry. Super great guy. Awesome conversation with him, and he made a statement that I kind of wanted to pitch back to both of you guys. And he's like, talked about calling style. And he's like, he goes, I'm more of a lover when it comes to calling. And he's like, not as much of a fighter. And he kind of talked about you guys and talked about guys like Corey and whatever. And he's like, when he heard, the caliber of how and the approach that you guys take from the bugling perspective and the chuckling and all this, and he was like, man, it just changed my thinking. So I think about that, and I've watched both of you guys go, and I'm like, which category do you guys fall in? I'm like, you guys are more fighters, right? Would that be? Do you think that's
Is that a fair assessment?
Is that a fair assessment
I
when
think
you
it
think
is,
about
but-
your calling styles?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so you're taking that maybe a step further, like talk about like situationally, where you utilize that in your favor, or how do you identify like, when is it more appropriate to maybe be a little more subtle and obviously out to where, Dirk, you're, charging at bulls, screaming in their face and stuff like that. Like how do you make those decisions or what brings you to like, all right, let's throw caution to the wind and let's just get after it.
I think if we think back to our middle school days or high school days, and you got some guy that's picking at somebody else. We've all seen it, whether we've been the guy getting picked at or we've been the guy picking at other people. Eventually, you're going to break it. You're going to break through their defenses to where they get pissed off, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do with elk. So I'm trying to take their temperature from the beginning of our conversation. Me and this bull, we're having a conversation. I'm going to see what his temperature's at. Some bulls, they've already got a chip on their shoulder and they're already kind of agitated. It doesn't take much to get them mad and have them come to fight. Others, they're just minding their own business, having a good day. But if you keep pecking at them and keep messing with them, pretty soon they're like, all right, I've had enough of you. We've seen this in the lunchroom at school. We've seen this. You see it at the bar. You see it wherever. I mean, of course, humans and elk are completely different, but in the regard of that primal instinct to fight, it's not so different. Because I think if you agitate something long enough, it's eventually going to want to fight. So I kind of play off the temperature of the bull, and kind of see how far I can, some bulls, like I say, he's just minding his own business, having a good day. Well, I'm going to slowly start pecking at him until maybe I can build his rage up enough to fight. Whereas another one, you make just 2 or 3 calls and he's ready to go. He's going to have to come kick your butt because he's already mad.
Right.
So
I think we should change
That's-
Dirk's nickname to the Bully instead of the Bugler.
yeah,
'Cause that's probably more apt based on that description.
Yeah, you're some-
You're the guy who walks into the peaceful meeting and starts kicking everybody's chair.
yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, my camera
Yeah.
guy does call me
Yeah.
Dirk Durham. So
No, and then to roll off on that a little bit, since Dirk stole all my answers, I'll kind of take it a different direction. And
I'm sorry.
is no, you're good. We're out there in September, and there's different ways to do it, and I think Dirk can attest to it. We've still called bulls in with just cow calls. It's worked.
Yeah.
But and not every time they're going to come in but they're typically going to waddle in, not say a word. They're going to look for their cow, and you're going to shoot them, right? And so, I mean, while I love killing elk, and that's my ultimate goal, and I would love to be able to figure out a plan to do that. The difference when you call the bull in the way that Dirk and mine and that aggressive style is you've now got that bull to snap, and it's a completely different experience as that bull starts to close from 60 to 40 to 20. He's bugling every step of the way. His eyes are rolled back in his head as he twists his head under the branch. He's got that crazy look in his eye. To me, that small difference, what seems like a very small difference, because we're ultimately still going to run an arrow through that bull, is worth the always going at him aggressively. And I'm the first one to admit, like, we may screw up some bulls because we just can't get that thermostat to crank over to the crazy pissed off elk. He's just going to stay his mellow self. He's going to go about his day, and we may actually lose an opportunity here or there. But that risk is worth that time when that bull rolls his eyes back in his head and he's coming to kill you.
Right. Yeah. I think.
Yeah. And
Go ahead.
And what I love about elk hunting too, and I will say this, just kind of a disclaimer. Hey, just because I do it this way doesn't mean it's the only way. There's
Right.
so many great elk hunters out there, way better than me, that they have their own little system dialed in that works great too. So I think if a guy, as far as listeners or new callers or whatever, or anybody, I do this too. If I can take a little bit of everybody else's ideas and put those in my quiver, I got more tools, right?
Yeah.
So I always like to say that disclaimer.
Yeah. At what point? I mean, obviously, there's a ton of trial and error, and you guys have boatloads of experience in the field from the time you were kids all the way up until now. At what point did you start to kind of define your calling style? Like, obviously, Dirk, you're a pretty aggressive guy. At what point did you go, what? I've tried all this soft calling crap. I'm going to go ahead and just scream at this guy and see what happens. And it seems to be almost like a signature way that you go about it.
I kind of figured it out on the third day. I don't want to sound like a jerk or conceited or anything, but I kind of figured it out on the third day I ever bow hunted elk, because I was successful. I kind of used those tactics and called in this bull and shot him. But
I guess that's going to work from here on out.
60% of the time it works every time.
That's right.
But why? And here's what made me think about it is, I didn't look at elk hunting as like I'm a hunter walking around trying to, become one with the forest and slip through the woods and sneak up and shoot an elk with my bow. I look at what elk are doing. Okay. Elk and why they call to each other and what happens, what's the cause and effect. And, they're advertising for ladies. They're showing off their dominance to other bulls and all this stuff. And I thought, elk are big, noisy animals, making bugles. They get mad. They come together. I just kind of thought I should role play. I thought, well, I'm just going to act like an elk. I'm going to role play like I'm an elk. I'm a kid, right? A 15-year-old kid. I'm going to just role play like I'm an elk and see if that works. And man, it worked awesome. I'm like, well, I'm going to just keep doing it. So over the years, I've really screwed up a lot of things more probably than I got right, but I kind of learned all these little things that kind of worked good, and I still every year screw everything up. But that's just kind of how from the beginning. I've always been a real aggressive caller or hunter. So
Yeah, JC started chuckling there a little bit. I know we were chuckling a little bit too when he was describing role playing. I could just see Dirk in the woods with some fake antlers on his head. We're walking around and bugling.
Yeah.
Some people spray elk pee in the air. Not
Yeah,
me.
right.
Oh, no.
I spray other kind of pee. No.
Yeah. That's funny. So, kind of moving maybe into similar areas here. One of the things that obviously us in Colorado right now really are kind of on the the cusp of is a little bit of the wolf conversation.
I just got an email about it too.
We're trying to sort through that mess. I know you guys are accustomed to or have hunted in wolf country and stuff like that, and the introduction. I know, Dirk, I've heard you talk about it probably on numerous occasions, but, what are the things in terms of not just, I don't want to get into like, hey, should Colorado let them in or not? Because we obviously know the answer to that. But more importantly, what did you guys see or have seen in terms of elk behavior that happened upon like introduction of wolves, and now we know obviously what happens with the amount that we see of their capacity to multiply and grow in numbers and stuff like that. And I've heard a lot, like we talked with Garrett from Top Priority, who's also from Idaho, and he's told us a bunch of stories about their experiences and things like that. What's you guys' kind of response to that, or observations with regards to it?
Well, I live in ground zero of where wolves were introduced in Idaho. 1996, they released wolves, probably 30 air miles from my house or less. And at first, 1996, you didn't really see a lot of wolves around. But by the year 2000, they had moved around a lot. And you start seeing, and by 2002, 2003, they'd made a big footprint, big impact on the elk behavior and elk numbers. And by 2005, they had decimated the elk in the region. Idaho's Clearwater region at one time was probably one of the highest concentrations of elk in the lower 48. This is before Colorado came on so strong. And it went from probably 19,000 elk to less than 2,000 elk in that period.
Wow.
So from 1994 to 2004, 2005, they had just decimated the elk there. So that's a numeric way to look at it. But also, they change the elk behavior. Elk are a lot tighter lipped these days. A lot of times they'll bugle. They just don't bugle super loud until you get really tight and get really close to them. I've got some canyons that I know there's elk there. I got trail cameras. You can't buy a bugle. I've hit it every week of September trying to get an elk to bugle. They won't bugle until you're like right on them, like within 100 yards. So the kind of country it is, you're never going to find them unless you just happenstance. So it's really complicated elk hunting. Back pre-wolf, people would go and set up a big, beautiful, picturesque elk camp, like Grandpa did. They'd have a big wall tent. And they would hunt that same little drainage for every year. I got my bull on this ridge, and nowadays, if you come to Idaho and hunt like that, at least North Idaho, you may not even see an elk or hear an elk or even see an elk track.
It's a camping trip
in a week's time. It's a camping trip. Yeah, you might get a few.
I said I'll take your bow and your rifle for a hike.
Yeah, yeah. If you're kind of hot, you might want to buy a tag.
Jason, how about you on that?
Yeah, so I think I am in the state with the most aggressive wolf reintroduction plan. I don't know if we're ever going to get to hunt them as predators. And, similar to Dirk, just watching, we're seeing it now more in our game regs and our special permits, and our quotas are just, tanking. We're down below 30% of the tags that we had just 5 years ago. Some of our best units went from 15 tags. We're down to 5 this year. So these areas, and I don't want to get this all political, but these politicians aren't dumb. My state's ran by King County, Seattle, Tacoma. They put a stipulation in this recovery plan that requires 2 of these packs to be on the west side of Washington, where I am residing. I live in the timber capital of the world here in Lewis County, and they know they're not even making an attempt. And so now they've put all of us in a position where you just allow these 2 packs on the west side, which Dirk just mentioned. These things grow and expand so quickly. So are you going to buckle and let them bring these 2 packs in just so we can get this over with, so we can start to hunt these things, or do you continue to fight to protect my backyard from wolves? And so they've almost put me in a weird spot where now I'm a bad guy against my fellow outdoorsmen on the east side, because they want us to accept them because they've had to take 19 packs themselves, but yet we have to establish these 2 packs on the west side. And it's put us in a weird cauldron of what's the right answer. And I try to be educated about it, and I don't know what the right answer is. And then my my feedback of hunting an area in Idaho with very, very heavy wolf populations is you can be in a canyon for 2 days straight on fire, knowing that you have multiple herd bulls. We'll be out eating our mountain house outside the camp, and you'll hear some howls in that. And then to go in that same canyon the next day in complete silence for the entire day is just like, it's a perfect case, to study. Yeah. It's a perfect study on how much these affect, and if you're, as Dirk mentioned, a lot of times our strategy is to go from trailhead to trailhead to trailhead, just hit areas, hike ridges. It makes it very tough because you could have a canyon that truly is loaded with elk, or a lot of elk using the area. But if those dang wolves happen to be in there to shut those things down, like, you just might you might overlook some very, very good elk hunting. But because the wolves are in that area, everything is just silent, and it's kind of it's working against us. And so it's very frustrating. I think Wyoming, if anybody has the right strategy, is all right. They're here. We've accepted them. Now let's shoot most of them.
We're in a similar situation that you are, Jason, that basically Denver and Boulder County run the state of Colorado, and without much input from the mountain areas or even the ranchers. So we're in very similar situations where you're right. They get smart. They try and pit us against each other for for a goal that they're trying to establish. So
well, and I think the interesting part is, like, Jason and I have talked about this, where, the forced introduction of a non-native, wolf in general, right, which is something else that's a little bit of a, caveat to that conversation, but where the proposal to re-enter them is into an area where there's just very little hunting based on the fact of how much private ground there is in that area, of a huge herd that, really has no way to prepare itself or adapt itself into that. And then when, just taking logic, heaven forbid, into this equation,
no,
where I go, I'm pretty sure the wolves that are in Wyoming, they know that
they're here.
They don't know that the state border is uncrossable.
Yeah.
There's a natural progression of things, and we've seen a couple sightings this year with them around, and they allow that to take its course, and we know how quickly they can multiply and that type of thing, and it's like they'll end up here. Patience is something, and we talk about that all the time in hunting in itself. But to force it, I think is a little bit unnatural, and I think we can probably put that to bed. But let's move on to something more fun.
Yeah, and I don't know where you're going to go with this fun stuff, but something came to mind when Jason, you were saying you were sitting around eating your mountain house. I want to know what your favorite mountain house meal is, because I know in our camp the chili mac is avoided at all costs. But there are some other fan favorites. So I want to know, when you guys are out in the back,
is the camp clear?
Country, what are you guys cracking open?
Do I have to
Go
say
ahead,
the
Jason.
Mountain House
I'm
brand?
still thinking.
No. They don't have to be Mountain House brand. If you've got a favorite brand, I know I tried a bunch of different things last year, but I know that's just kind of you said Mountain House, so I stuck with it. Yeah,
I really enjoy the Peak Refuel stuff. Almost everything they make has it seems like it has more of that high end flavor. And when, sometimes when you're out there grinding, 10, 15 miles a day, that little bit of difference, Mountain House is good. It's edible. It's, I like some of the flavors, but it's just like, to me, I'm like, man, if you've got a chef in here designing this stuff, like, let's make it taste like I'm an Olive Garden, or let's make it taste like, the best chili. And so, no, I think Peak Refills did they're a little more expensive, which I think you're paying for that. But
Sure.
The quality and flavors that Peak Refill has, I think everything, garlic Alfredo is probably my favorite. The chicken Alfredo is really
That sounds good.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I had the strawberry granola breakfast from them last year, and I really enjoyed that. So, what about you, Dirk? What is your preferred flavor, or the one you avoid?
Yeah, I like the Peak Refuel stuff too. I like the price point of the Mountain House a little better, just because when you have to buy 20 of them, it all adds up.
Sure.
But I've got a lot of favorite ones. I really like the pepper steak. I like the pasta primavera, but I will pack one of those little Star-Kissed smoked salmon packages and add to that pasta primavera. Dude, it's the bomb.
Now you're just getting fancy.
Yeah.
That's game changing right there.
Yeah. I know. I just went and started showing off. But
it's got expensive taste. This guy.
Backcountry chef du jour.
But I hate to sound cliche, but I like the biscuits and gravy. I'd never eaten them until last year. Trent Fisher said, "Here, have some of these." I'm like, in real life, normal biscuits and gravy, I don't like them because they're like soggy and kind of sweaty and gross. So I'll tell you what, Mountain House biscuits and gravy, they're pretty awesome. They stay the little biscuits kind of stay a little bit crispy, and they're good. I like those things. Those are like I'm going to eat a lot of that this year.
That's a pretty filling meal too. I know I'm a pretty big guy, and I know I can get through about half, maybe 3/4 of a bag before I tap out, and just go. Yeah. I'm just going to feel like I've got an extra load in my pack carrying it around.
The hiking capacity goes down when you weigh yourself down with the whole serving, if you double down on that. So, all right, fun stuff here. Here we go. Last year, you guys did a little bit of a, social media competition. Some of you may have seen that. It's rather comical. We won't talk about who won or lost, but you guys essentially both held up your end of the bargain on, your favorite WWE character, Into the Woods, which was absolutely hilarious. And Scotty, actually sitting next to us here, has his AEW shirt on, so
support your local wrestler.
How do you one up that one? What's on tap this year? I mean, you guys have the perfect personalities, and I think you guys are a lot like us. You rib and jab each other all the time. Like, what's on tap for this year? I mean, how are you gonna outdo that?
Man, I don't know. The thing is, I don't think we sit down in big marketing meetings and pencil it out on a chalkboard and say, all right, we're going to do this, this, and this. And it's almost like we just kind of wing it. I hate to say that. And probably Jason's like, wait, you haven't signed out something yet?
Well, you gave it away when you said chalkboard, so.
You've had plenty of time to think about it, sitting around with the Rona going around the country. There should be some very creative juices flowing.
I don't know that we've really planned a lot. I mean, we have talked about Charlie wearing a leprechaun suit or something, but I don't know if Jason's ordered that yet.
Yeah, as Dirk mentioned, like last year, the whole scenario got started. I think Dirk made a post. That guy that's sitting in front of the little white board, changed my mind sign. And Dirk says the Maverick's a better call or something than the Peak call, changed my mind. And it was that one little post that kind of got the creative juices going. And Dirk's like, hey, I've got this idea. Let's pin our calls against each other. And I'm like, this might be the worst idea ever. Like, you make fun of my call, I make fun of your call. And then, I don't know how many of you guys watched 8 Mile back in the day, but you're like, man, that might be brilliant. Like when Eminem disses himself, like everybody has to basically drop the mic. Like these guys are, you can't even make fun of them, right? Nobody can make fun of you if you make fun of yourself at that level. And it turned out to be pure gold, and a really good strategy. And I probably owe Dirk some thanks, even though I was really unsure at the beginning. But it was fun. It got a lot of our followers involved. We were at the World Championships, and me and Dirk were out, test blowing a call really quick before the competition, and somebody riding over our head in the gondola like Team Maverick, and then somebody the next week like Team Pink. Just for all of them to get involved and to have some fun with it, I think what it's all about.
Yeah, well, and I think it speaks volumes to, just like we started the conversation, which is the approachability. You guys have taken, I'd say some risk, kind of throwing it and putting it out there to people. And like you said, not taking yourselves too seriously. I think that there's a lot to be said with that, and that it provides kind of a human element to it that you guys have really utilized, social media platforms.
Sure.
And obviously you guys have done a lot in terms of the hunts that you guys have filmed. And I watched the Sub-Zero this week as well, which looked miserable, and except for the huge deer that you guys took multiple. I'm like, well, that part's cool, but and growing up in Nebraska, like other than it being super, a lot more undulation in the terrain, like I actually have a picture of one of our staff members, Darby, one time we were rifle hunting, and I took a picture of him where we're sitting on a side hill, and we'd sat there long enough glassing that his whole, like his hat, everything, he's starting to become a snowbank. And I'm like, reminded me of that as I was watching that this week, and I'm like, man, I sure like September. That's a lot nicer.
Yeah.
What I think, to me, we're able to be authentic.
Right.
My wife always tries to tell me, Dirk, you take things too far. You need to tone it down a little bit, because in the spirit of making people laugh, sometimes it's at my own expense.
Sure.
And that's what I love about working for Jason. I mean, he's pretty open-minded. We got to keep it classy, but he lets me get away with some stuff, and I think if we can make fun of ourselves, we're not here to talk crap about competitors. We're not here to beat our chests about who's the best in the world. We're here just to have a good time, and we're all humans. We're all elk hunters. We're all just trying to be a big family. And I think if we can be authentic and kind of be ourselves, I think people can identify with that. So
it's like
at our own expense sometimes.
Yeah, it's Ron Burgundy classy is what it is.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
if we're going to put it in a category,
Yeah.
you got to be able to laugh and enjoy yourself and not take yourself too seriously. I think that applies to a lot of different aspects of life, but you guys are pretty good at it, and it makes you very relatable when you're on, when we watch videos, or again, when we meet each other in person or listen to you guys on a podcast, you guys make it sound like you're just one of us. You're not some hoity-toity, walking around the woods with his pinky in the air, kind of guys. You guys are farting and, eating terrible foods, and you know what I mean? Like that's what makes it fun and exciting. Because you're just like we
Dirk
are.
does have his pinky in the. When Dirk's drinking White Claws, his pinky is in there.
I did see that. I did see that last week, by the way. I did watch that as well. So.
All right, Dirk, maybe you went down a little notch in my book there if you're drinking the White Claws with the pinky in the air. I'm sorry.
Yeah, fat guy problem.
If you were drinking like a Keystone, you'd be like, all right, that guy, he's pretty cool. He's one of us. But a White Claw, come on.
Yeah.
So
Keystone's almost pretty much near water. I mean, it's almost water.
Right.
So
It's
you'd probably
just
get away
enough.
with that.
Just enough flavor to make it feel like you're drinking a beer.
right.
Yeah.
Well, kind of as we get close to wrapping up here, a couple, maybe final things. And since we're having some fun, I know some of the funniest things that I saw, like with you, Dirk, was, obviously the face painting piece. Are you now an adopter of the face paint, or was that a one-time deal? I mean, like.
That was a one-time thing. I'm probably not going to do it again. I would do it again with Trent, but that would be the only time or only place I would ever do it.
So
I'm just gonna
you wouldn't
say,
cheat on him?
That stuff. I would never cheat on Trent on the face paint. That stuff, it just gets everywhere, man. I have that stuff all over me. I mean, you put it on your face, but before you know it, you got it on your sleeves and your hat, and it's just greasy. And I don't like it.
Especially
like
if you
it.
touch your face a lot. If you're rubbing your nose or your eyes, and then your hands are full of grease.
Right. And then,
and I'm a sweater, and I sweat like crazy, and that's no, it's no good.
right. So last thing, Dirk, I know you, and we'll kind of, tie this in, obviously, for those that watch and kind of follow anything that we do, obviously a big part of what our mission is trying to provide, obviously, people with information, provide them with educational stuff, give them insight, bring guys like you that are, way smarter and way more experienced and have a lot more insight probably than we do in some of these areas. But for us, the big part that we think we are good at is understanding the physical demand side of, what it requires to get out into the high country and how much it is a huge ask to prepare for it. Like, Dirk, I know you had your shoulder. I saw the other day you were saying that, you're finally back to, getting your bow back in your hand and getting back to drawing. Like, what are some of the things that you guys do to prepare, physically as far as September and into, the whole hunting season? What do you guys do on that side of the fence?
Typically, I like to hike. I like to hike a lot leading up to September. Start out, hiking hills. If your legs don't work, you can't hunt, right? So trying to get my legs freshened up and hiking, I do that a lot through the summer. As towards, August gets there, I start putting on heavier weights and start, as far as putting weight in my pack. But usually right before season, I've got a 5-mile loop I'll hike with, 30 to 40 pounds in my pack on the daily. And it's usually hot, horrible. It's like, I would get off of work and go hike the hill. It may be 80, 90 degrees out.
Oh, yeah.
But so not only is it physically demanding, it's also, it messes with your head a little bit. Hiking out in the hot sun, it sucks.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it sucks. But once you get to doing it, you start to get your sweat going and keep hydrated through it, and you're just like, yeah, this is fine. And I think it builds some mental toughness too, because in September it's probably 10 to 20 degrees cooler, depending on the day, and that just makes it a lot easier. I'll do some dumbbell workouts, for shoulders, just strength training type stuff. I don't go too far in. I don't CrossFit. I probably should. That's a pretty awesome workout, but I just try to build strength, try to keep my upper body strong. But that's basically what I do.
Yeah, we had 2 questions, from a couple listeners, and you kind of hit on both of those. One of them was from a buddy of mine, actually, that I grew up with, Jake Holscher, and he asked, kind of, what do you guys do on the mental side? And I think you kind of just touched on that, like to prepare yourself for the physical demands. And I think there's a lot to be said with that, right? Like, the summer months are going to be super hot. And when you go out and you kind of progressively start putting a pack on and add and load and everything else and putting on that mileage, like, not only I think are you building some physical resiliency, but a lot of times the mental side of it too, right? Like, I actually kind of play these mind games as I hike a lot of times where I know when it starts sucking, I start talking to myself a little bit where I'm like, all right, we got to dig in. And I've got my wife's a pack mule. She's a nutbag. So my best way to train is to go out and have her hike in front of me, because she'll never stop. And no matter how far or how high or how long we go, like,
she's like the rabbit on the race course.
It's
that
unbelievable.
Just keeps going round and round and round.
We'll get done, my tongue's hanging to the ground. She's like, that was great, wasn't it? I'm like, shut up, we're going home. So, Jason, how about you?
So for me, I live at 300 feet sea level.
Way up there.
I'm a gym rat. My schedule basically is packed in before the COVID home lockdown. Like, I just swing into the gym before. To be honest, I have not did anything the last 3 months besides eat a little bit better, which I'm still losing some weight. And for me, just being a big guy and the ability to look at a cookie and gain a pound, for me, it's really just a diet. Like, if I can keep myself in that 240 to 250 range, for those of you that don't know or can't see, I'm like a 6'4", 6'5" guy. So 240 is about right. And then because of that size, I do strength train quite a bit, legs, deadlifts, like that sort of stuff. So more functional stuff. Like I'm not the guy that's going to sit down on it. I'll work bench press and curls and shoulder stuff in occasionally. But, for me, from my sports days, like it's, heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, lunges, stuff that to me, will actually translate out into the woods.
Yeah.
So that's really it. As hunting season gets close, I do have about a 5.5 mile loop. But the unfortunate thing is I can only really get about 500 foot of elevation in on that, that loop. And so to me, it's, in the gym, like, all right, we're going to go to we call them the stairs to hell, just the revolving escalator. And I kind of play tricks on myself, a little bipolar, like, all right, what's the one thing you don't want to do on the way to the gym? Well, you don't want to get on the stair climber, go get on it, and then I'm going to crank it up a level, or I'm going to go an extra 5 minutes and, kind of turn on myself because, there's days I don't want to sit down on the rowing machine and row 10,000 meters. I'm like, all right, now you're going to row 15,000 meters because, your body doesn't want to do that. And so for me, and then the mental toughness and even some of the physical, like I was told a long time ago, and whether it's a placebo effect or not, I'm not going to question it. You hear the term like old man strength. I had some of these older guys tell me like, hey, I just got old man strength. And some of it's either coming through or it's just from years and years of doing this that like, or I'm not very smart. Like my mental toughness is there from years on years of doing this. And it seems like every year it's getting a little bit easier to go up in the mountains. You're like, well, you did this last year. You've been in this situation before and it's been way worse. And my legs just seem to be better every year. I don't know whether it is part of the training or not, but like I can just, we're going to go out on a bear hunt here in a couple of days and I'm not too worried about it. It's like, you might be a little bit more sore that first day, second and third day, but you're probably going to live through it and you're going to be just fine. You're going to be able to hunt, as hard as I want. And so,
right.
A little of that's, not so much, the physical training leading up to it, which will kind of, hone that mental edge, but it's just from years and years of doing this that it's like, we'll get through it.
Right. And I think go ahead.
I think expectation versus reality too has a lot to play with it. So maybe you've seen some super athletic, in shape dudes just climb mountains like crazy, and you and in your mind you're going to go elk hunting, and you think I'm going to do it that same way. But the reality of it is, maybe you physically can't. But what you can do, everybody can climb that mountain. I don't care who you are. Everybody can climb a mountain. It may be a little different pace, A 500-pound guy could probably climb up there. It might take one step every hour, but he can climb that mountain. So I think it's kind of getting through your head. It's like, I'll get there. I'll go kill it. I'll hike way over there. I'll kill that elk, and I'll pack him out. It's just going to take whatever time I can do.
Sure.
And I think once everybody, their expectations versus reality, it's like if you can expect and have the confidence to know that, well, I can go do that and I'm going to do it. Once they get that mind mental set that they're going to do that, there's not a lot that you can't do.
Yeah.
I talk about, I think a lot of times, like on those horrible long days and you're hiking out 2 or 3 hours in the dark after you've already hiked 12, 13 miles that day, and you're like beat down, tired. And then you think about all these folks you hear about in the history stories, whether it was the Bataan Death March or some of the Native Americans that were moved across, halfway across the United States on foot. Nobody gave them any extra slack. They didn't have good clothing. They didn't have technical boots. They didn't have nutrition. Right. They were barely alive. And these folks did some amazing feats of strength and mental toughness. Heck, we just had a day of elk hunting. I mean, why are you being such a wimp for? Really? I mean, it's mind-opening.
It's all perspective.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
absolutely.
I don't know if we're blessed or cursed with a whole bunch of really tall mountains here in Colorado that are hiked on the daily. They're known as 14ers, and Joel and I went up one. This was last year in our hunt prep, and to your point, anybody can make it up the mountain. We made it up. It wasn't pretty, but we made it up and back. And as we're going up, and coming back, people are literally running past us. Because they decided to run the however many mile round trip and vertical climb that goes along with that. And when we got back, there was a tremendous sense of accomplishment. What we had accomplished that day. Granted, it took us 12 hours to do it. And some people it only took 3 or 4, but there is that sense of accomplishment that you did do it.
That was a large bucket of suck it is basically what it boiled down to. So, well, that's awesome. I think, we could probably sit here for hours more, questions and things like that. But, I want to kind of wrap things up and tons of great stuff. Obviously it's fun and really appreciate you guys' time for, jumping on here and being so approachable and things like that. Thank you guys for, you guys have, directly kind of supported us for the last, 2 years as far as, getting us to be disciples, if you will, of the calls and all the guys in our camp have really grown to love them as well. And probably some of that's because Jason and I have kind of pushed them in that direction based on our own experiences. So it's awesome to get an opportunity to talk to you guys. It's fun to watch the things that you guys do. And obviously I know the new headquarters, how's all that? You guys up and running with that? Or as much as you can be?
I'm actually sitting in the front.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm sitting in the front office here, and things are finally coming, full circle, and hoping to get moved in fully here shortly. So
that's awesome.
We're here. Fortunately, it's up and running. Unfortunately, I'm stuck here in Southwest Washington.
Well, it's not too hard for folks to find, either of you guys on, Instagram and YouTube and all over, Phelps Game Calls as far as, just your website. And Dirk, I know you have your website's relatively new, the Bugler. Obviously people can reach out and touch base with you guys. You guys do an awesome job as far as, connecting with folks in the field. And so thank you guys so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. It's fun to talk. I knew it'd be a little bit of give and take in terms of serious stuff and fun stuff, and I think we accomplished that. So, obviously if you come to Colorado, our doors are always open for you guys anytime. We'd love to have you, love to meet up with you if you ever come out. And who knows, maybe there's a hunt someday in the future that we can put together, which would be cool too. So.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Appreciate
you having us on. It's always fun to talk elk hunting and make fun of each other and whatever.
Yeah, I mean we thought maybe it'd be an intervention, but we went against it. So.
Oh shoot!
All right, thank you guys. Appreciate everybody tuning in and listening, and we appreciate you guys joining us today. So thanks so much. As we always say, aim straight, and may your tags all be filled this year.
That sounds good.
Have a good one, guys.
You too.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
A big thanks to our guests Jason and Dirk for joining us today on the H3O podcast. We also thank our listeners for tuning in today and hope that you'll tune in to future episodes as well as check out all past episodes on the H3O YouTube page. Please leave your comments in the comment section below, as well as be sure to subscribe to our channel and find us on all social media outlets at Untitled Harvest. Thanks again for joining us today, and until next time, may your aim be straight and your tags be filled.